clearing your celly when I'm feeling lonely. When it's all over, please get up and leave. Question, tell me how you feel about this. Try to control me, boy, you get dismissed. Pay my own funnel and I pay my own
Destiny's Child, independent women. Liz Hull's got another piece out talking about Sandy Bowen, who was another prosecution expert witness who backed up Dewey Evans's claims. And the big revelation really from this story, which is just a summary of her interview with Sandy Bowen on the podcast, is that Cheshire Police had used Sandy Bowen to form this further report of the full file that they sent to the CPS. That got rejected, and I have to ask the question, if you've come under intense scrutiny and criticism for the evidence that you gave in the first Letby trial, surely you are now no longer an independent woman, an independent witness, and that your whole career and reputation is on the line and is hinged on the fact that you need Letby to be guilty. So any reports that you now submit to the CPS, even if Letby did murder these extra 9 babies, which obviously she didn't, but you're no longer going to be an independent witness if the outcome is necessary that she's guilty, and your whole career hinges on that. So we're going to look at the transcript of the interview with Dr. Sandy Bowen. I used to play clips, but this one's actually behind a paywall. So we're just going to look at the transcripts. So Liz Hull introduces her, and she says, as part of their investigation, the police asked another medic to peer review his reports. They're talking about Evans's reports, and that was a man called Martin Ward Platt, but sadly he became ill during that process, so he couldn't carry on. And what does that tell you, that the fact that the police were looking at getting Martin Ward Platt to review Evans' report, when Martin Ward Platt was the doctor who backed up Sir Roy Meadows' findings in the Angela Canning's miscarriage of justice. So that sort of tells you what they're looking for. I just need to give you a premise. So what happened, and you're probably not going to believe it, but what Cheshire Police did is, when they got an extra prosecution witness, Sandy Bowen, when they instructed her, instead of asking her, obviously, here you go, here's the medical files, can you tell us what you think? Instead of doing this, and it's going to sound unbelievable, what they did is they actually sent her Dewey Evans' report and said, can you, and the medical notes, and said, can you just check that it's okay? And she, rather than her independently coming up with what she thought and then them comparing it to with what Dewey Evans said. I mean, what are the chances that Sandy Bowen would write a report and say, I think this is due to air embolism, even though she's got almost no experience in air embolism. What are the chances that she would say that, and then Dewey Evans would say, this baby died of air embolism? Then you might have some credibility, but no, they said Dewey Evans' report. It sounds unbelievable, but that's genuinely what happened. Past the introductions, Sandy Bowen talks about how she became an expert witness, and this just really struck me. And then I think if they feel that you do a good job, then the word kind of gets around that you'd be a good person to be an expert. So yeah, we know what sort of good job that she'd be doing. Put it this way, it wouldn't be a good job for the defence. It would just be the word would get around that she'd be a good expert witness for the prosecution. I mean, they don't say it, but you can just tell from that sort of statement. So they're talking about the reports that the police sent to Sandy Bowen. So when you sent your reports back, so Sandy Bowen's reports back to Cheshire Police, did you know when you sent those reports back whether they aligned with what Dr. Evans had said? Sandy Bowen, yes, because I'd had his reports. So, I mean, the obvious question from Liz and Caroline would have been, why didn't you tell them not to do it this way? And Sandy Bowen does sort of hint at that. She says, that was, I mean, I didn't decide that I should have peer reviewed those. That was the Cheshire Police. That was what they gave me. They wanted me to peer review. So it wasn't for me to go back and said, oh, I don't think I should do it that way. Well, why not? I mean, Professor Jane Hutton did when they asked her. They asked Professor Jane Hutton to come up with a 1 in a million figure or something on chances of Letby being on shift, and Jane Hutton said, "You're not going about it the right way." But then again, they dropped Jane Hutton, and they didn't drop Sandy Bowen. So maybe she's absolutely right just to be a yes woman. I was only following orders. Okay, this is going to be pure rage bait now. They go on to talk about Professor Shuli's panel. Okay, Liz Hull mentions, and then they changed the letters to numbers. So they were A, B, C, D, and they got changed to 1, 2, 3, 4 for no reason. And Sandy Bowen comments, and then the babies who can't be identified, quite rightly, who are identified by letters in the court case in Thirlwall, were given numbers. Now, I think, to a parent who's lost a baby, to think that your child is just then a number, it is terrible, absolutely terrible. I mean, calling them A, B, C and D is fine, but 1, 2, 3 and 4, that is absolutely terrible. And she goes on to say, I don't agree with their conclusions. I don't think they're informed. I do wonder if they have had all the notes. I don't really know what she's implying. Is she implying that Shuli's team didn't have the medical records? I mean, I know this is some crackpot theory of a couple of Twitter trolls because they've literally got no other argument. But just think about it for 2 minutes. How would you come up with the causes of death if you didn't have the medical notes? How would you know? Whether the mother was put on, what time the mother was put on antibiotics, or in more detail, how would you know what size tube JR used on the first attempt to try and intubate a baby without having the medical notes? I mean, it's just an absolutely ridiculous comment to make. I mean, if nothing else, here's the international panel's report. which I'm sure people have seen. It was handed to everyone, including Liz Hull. And page 2, at the end of page 2, so we're not very far in, the defendant and our lawyers provided the panel with access to medical records. Do you need any more? And then Liz Hull says, because nobody actually really knows that, do they? Whether they've actually seen all the medical notes. Huh? Whatever. More rage bait. Sandy Bowen. But there's also emerged emails from Shu Lee telling people on his panel that it's the only hope, it's her only hope, and which we're the last hope. Bearing in mind, most of the people on the panel, it was an international panel, so they would have never have even heard of Lucy Letby anyway. So that doesn't strike me as being independent, take an independent stance, because Sandy Bowen now, she's all about the independence, with how she independently reviewed independently reviewed all the medical notes without Evans's notes to look at. Oh no, that didn't happen, did it? So Caroline Cheetham asks, am I right that Shu Lee's point is that the skin changes that are evident when a baby's got an air embolism are very, very specific, and the ones that you wrote about, the ones that the doctors witnessed, don't fit the picture that he paints in his report being the original 1989 Leon Tanswell paper that describes air embolism. Well, that's what he's saying, Sandy Bowen says. I don't agree with him, but that's what he's saying. I mean, the chutzpah of her to not agree with what he's saying about his own report. It's just another level. And then, and I've seen this crop up a few times, that Liz Hull and they're sort of trying to be really sneaky here, talking about Dr. Gibbs. I remember him vividly giving evidence about this, about how they were baffled by how when they started resuscitating, there was simply absolutely no response from some of these babies. We interviewed him and he talked quite a lot about, I've resuscitated a lot of babies and they come back, but they might not survive. And this is Liz Hull talking, but these babies were just not coming back, were they? Sandy says no. Now, the fact that Liz Hull's talking about this, it's almost like as if she's implying that this is some sort of extra evidence of air embolism, when that is not. I've not seen where that's a symptom of air embolism. In fact, quite the opposite. I'll post a thorough testimony from a doctor who said about air embolism that she has since come across a case of air embolism in a baby, but they actually were able to resuscitate that baby. So, I mean, the subtle introduction of that here, it sort of implies that it's somehow extra evidence towards foul play when it's not. And then, of course, they miss this is Liz Hull, the whole big picture of all the circumstantial evidence which the jury saw and was heard for each baby. The handover notes, the Facebook searches, they heard that over and over again, and for that to be completely dismissed. Now, someone please explain to me, even on a circumstantially, what does a handover note or a Facebook search of the mother have to do with murdering a baby, even circumstantially? Like, I know there's some spoof movie where if a website got like 10,000 views or something, they would murder someone online. I mean, is that what we're talking about? Did the mother set that up for her baby, and Letby was the 10,000th viewer that caused? It's a joke. So basically what the prosecution were arguing, and it was such a tenuous link, was that I don't need to go into the handover notes, because they were saying that it was a trophy, obviously, but only 21 out of the 257 were even relating to babies on the indictment. So she took home all the handover. She took home loads of handover sheets. Same with Facebook searches. She Facebook searched everyone, including the mother. Like, the mothers were only less than, it was I calculated 1.35% of her Facebook searches were of parents on the indictment. Completely meaningless. If it wasn't meaningless, even if it was 100%, if it wasn't meaningless enough. But actually, I mean, I would actually be interested to know whether not that it matters, but whether they were actually manual Facebook searches, because that's what they're calling them. They're calling them Facebook searches. But I would just be interested, are they actual manual input Facebook searches, or were they her search history, her website browsing history? Because the reason I'm making the distinction is, and I've been complaining about it on Twitter, the only thing that is being fed to me by the social media feed is loads and loads of videos of black people stealing things, and anyone looking at my search history would think that I was someone obsessed with black people committing crimes and stealing things, when I've got absolutely no interest in it at all. It just gets fed to me, and I'm sort of interested to know, it doesn't matter, but is it that Facebook was feeding these things to Letby on what's the Facebook equivalent of a For You page? And again, bearing in mind, if you were to look at someone's, I've mentioned it before on Facebook, even back in 2015, by default, people's Facebook profiles were private by default. Before then, I think 2014 they changed it. Default was private. So if you were to look at someone's profile, they would inherently have to have given you, the parent would have had to have given you permission anyway. But I'm just interested whether it was something that Facebook sort of recommended to her, especially when they're talking about she would look up a baby on like an anniversary of the birth or death. In some cases it would be the same day, and that sort of struck me, because I've had it on a social media thing before where the website will say, this happened on this date last year, and sort of bring it to your attention. But like I say, even if they were manual searches, again, it's not evidence. It's not circumstantial evidence of anything. I mean, the prosecution was saying that she was hunting for grief, implying she was hunting for grief, when there were text messages that she had sent to a colleague saying that she wanted to avoid the mother or the parents the following day after her death, because she just couldn't deal with them. And then also, we know after the trial, if she was hunting for grief, she would have been all over listening to the parents' victim impact statements, which she correctly refused to go up and listen to. Right, moving on. Sandy Bowen says, I feel incredibly sorry for the staff at Countess of Chester throughout all of this, because I think that the doctors and nurses who have had huge amount of criticism about their care of these babies, that they only collapsed or died because of substandard care. Now, if you're a doctor, especially if you're a doctor, surely you should be interested in criticising substandard care, especially if a death was avoidable, not just from then, but looking forward as well, so that they don't continue to make the same mistakes and other parents aren't affected. But if substandard care has been identified, then surely that criticism is valid. I mean, what a thing to say, especially coming from a doctor. And then next, and then this is actually laughable. And then there's this whole Pseudomonas and sewage narrative that has been put together. Narrative about the sewage. Is she denying that there was sewage? You know, no neonatal unit is perfect. Come on, who's not got a bit of sewage dripping from their kitchen? Come on. Let's go on. They're talking about the differences in what the defence was saying about how well the baby, whether they were stable or not. And Sandy Bowen says, I don't think they all were really poorly. So for me, that baby's stable, and Mike Hall, he's the defence prosecution witness that wasn't called, didn't agree with that for most of the babies. So that was a bone of contention for us. So and yet Sandy Bowen went ahead in the trial and said these babies were stable. I think Dewey's saying the baby was doing well. That might be kind of saying the same thing. I think what Mike Hall was saying was that in some of the babies, so this isn't even new from what the international panel was saying. Obviously, the international panel was saying that these babies weren't stable either. But even back when they were having this meeting with Mike Hall, even he was disagreeing with that. I think what Mike Hall was saying was that in some of the babies their respiratory rate was higher than it should have been. Well, that was because they had respiratory distress syndrome. Oh, that's all right then, but you can be very stable and have respiratory distress syndrome. I mean, it's all right. We can discount it because their respiratory problems because they've got respiratory distress syndrome. How are you? Fine. Just got a touch of the AIDS. Okay, fine. Ridiculous. And then finally we go on to talk about the this revelation that Sandy Bowen was involved with these 11 charges that they tried to push through on 9 different babies that were rejected by the central CPS, and the CPS said it didn't reach the threshold. And Sandy Bowen says, massive own goal. I was surprised of that, and I think there's certainly some of them did. Well, if she helped compile the original CPS reports, and she said here, certainly thinks that these secondary reports did meet the threshold. So it's the same, what I'm saying about it being an own goal, that Cheshire Police have used the same person to compile both the reports, and so now you can tell that one standard of report did reach trial when they put it through the CPS the first time, and now the second time, even though that she's already a convicted murderer, the standard must have been the same, because the same person who compiled both the reports thinks that they met the standard, and it got rejected. I mean, it's just an own goal. And here we finish. What a note to finish on. I told the truth, Sandy Bowen says. I didn't make the decision. At the end of the day, the jury did. Wash my hands of it. Thank you very much. That's what we think. about Sandy Bowen.